Okay, hi, everybody. Welcome to the April 26th Sustainability Oversight Committee meeting. And I guess we'll start with open forum.
Don't think we have anybody.
Okay, then we can move to reviewing the minutes. Do we have two sets of minutes, Everett, or just one?
Two. Yeah, we actually have the ones from February and March. Because in February we did not have a quorum. Or sorry, in March.
Any issues? Can I hear a motion to approve? I see a motion from Mitch. Second. Hey. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Let's look at our next meeting minutes.
I broke my collarbone for that meeting.
Hope you're doing okay now, Bill.
Yeah, it's fine. One of the best bones to break, I think.
Any comments? Motion to approve? I see Mitch. Second?
Second.
Nate? All in favor? We're good? Thank you, Everett. And I think now we're announcements.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I don't think we can transition to I
We
guess
can just go to old business. All right.
yeah. I'll quickly introduce this and then I'll turn it over to you, Ken, and the rest of the BNL team. So as I indicated Friday to the committee, we've had a change in leadership. Tom Robinson is no longer with BNL. And so Jamie Burchard is taking over as project manager for the Brighton Climate Action Plan as part of Barton Judas. We will be keeping Tom on board to help us through the public engagement process, as we feel his experience with the town is invaluable. And so here to talk a little bit more about this transition and what we can expect from this process is Senior Vice President with Barton Judas, Ken Knudsen.
All right, thanks, Everett. Thank you all for letting us join you tonight. I actually have been involved in the project, but behind Tom, when Tom was project manager, I had been the officer in charge for the project. So as Everett mentioned, Tom has chosen to move on, and certainly he was bringing the project quite a bit of institutional knowledge. So in working with Tom and discussions with Mike and Everett, we've actually executed or prepared a sub-consultant agreement that keep Tom on in the project in some of the areas that he adds the greatest value. Certainly, he's been involved to date, but his public outreach skills, attendance at public events, participation in that area, as well as recommended initiatives that are going to be intricate to the plan update, are what Tom is going to remain involved with, and he will be attending at least two other SOC meetings in the future. So if there are any questions, again, we're under contract with Brighton to bring you a plan update for our scope, and we're trying to make this transition as seamless as possible for all of us. So again, thank you for your assistance and your candid input to date. I think we're all set and we're moving ahead. So that said, I'd like to introduce Jamie. In preparation for tonight's meeting, Jamie and Grace, with some input from Tom, as well as we have one of our team members here from Anchor. We put together a brief PowerPoint that's going to serve to, number one, introduce Jamie and some of her skills as it relates to climate action, as well as use that as the talking points for tonight's meeting. So with that, I will hand it over to Jamie. Thank you all.
Great, thank you, Ken. Everett, am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you can now. Yep.
Okay, thumbs up if that's clear for everyone. Perfect, thank you. So yes, thank you for the introduction, Ken. And we've had some internal meetings in preparation for this transition. And I'm happy to kind of report out our progress status to date on the project. It was a helpful exercise for me in stepping into this role to follow up on, again, keeping the project on task and on schedule. So I think it was a really helpful process for me to kind of put this PowerPoint together and kind of educate myself on what has been accomplished to date. So just a little brief background on kind of my work. I've been with Barton and LaJudas since about January timeframe. Before that, I was 2 years, I was a senior project manager at Bergman. And before that, I had about close to 14 years experience working for the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. And so I did actually work with Everett and Mike in that capacity, doing a lot of outreach and education on MS4 compliance, stormwater management work and assistance. And I've got pretty robust background in the area of water resources planning. So floodplain and again, watershed plan implementation. I've worked extensively with municipalities. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to work with the town of Brighton and to move forward in their update of your climate action plan and to integrate some of these strategies that I can bring to the table and certainly leverage the knowledge and capacity working with Tom moving forward. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm always welcome to having conversations moving forward if anyone wants to reach out and discuss further any ways I can be of assistance to this project. So I did become, I thoroughly read the community engagement plan. I was in attendance at the first public meeting. And so I've had some internal meetings again with Grace to kind of bring me up to speed on where we are in terms of the timeline. So looking at where we should be for our meeting number 4, what we decided to do in the transitioning between project management, we moved up the review of the greenhouse gas inventory and cap from the next meeting number 5. So when that opportunity comes up in the PowerPoint, I will move the talking points over to Lena DeSantis, and I have integrated her PowerPoint into this presentation as well. And then I do see that we were intending to discuss the Brighton Climate App and of course the spring public event number 1. And so I think what we'll do is we will have Lena talk a little bit more about the discussion that we've had with the town staff on some of that review of the inventory. And then what we'll do is I'll pass it over to Tom and he can talk briefly about some of his ideas for the spring public event. And then we could possibly touch upon any other outstanding items in concert with that discussion. So again, this was a really good way for me to kind of bring myself up to speed and educate about the planning process. So again, to date, there has been the completion of the community engagement plan. We have developed and launched the project website. In concert with the project website, we've got 2 public input tools. One is the ideas wall, which has been launched, and the other is the interactive map, which is also called the climate app. So again, I think there was some discussion on how and when to launch that interactive map, but I will let Tom talk about that in concert with the spring public event activity. Also, there have been participation in 3 Sustainability Oversight Committee meetings. And as I have mentioned, we have facilitated public workshop number 1. So quite a bit has been accomplished to date. So good work to everyone. So with that, I will continue to advance the slides, but I will invite Lena DeSantis to introduce herself and to provide a little bit of an overview of the work that she and her team has been working on to date.
Hey everyone, thank you. Some random conference hotel room, so I don't have everything at my hands. Can you hear me? Is that okay? The connection all right? Okay, perfect. So thanks, Jamie. So really, we had a great meeting with the town last week, and we just wanted to go over kind of our approach to make sure it was good with the committee. And we had some questions on kind of where we could go with the greenhouse gas inventory. So our step 1 was that we reviewed the greenhouse gas inventory. You guys have a great inventory. I mean, it captures all your major sources quite comprehensively. It gives us a really good tool to start with. It follows the New York State protocol. So we do not want to spend time or budget redoing that work. It's there. Brendan and Everett have been really helpful and have actually given us a lot of the Excel background files, so we can really just use the raw data and review everything. Everything looks great. So it's now really where we want to go with this inventory. So step 2 is, again, updating this greenhouse gas inventory. We want to look at whether we want to update some sources. We definitely want to update some of the emission factors. And also there have been slight changes to the New York State protocol. So we would want to update it towards that to make sure that it's still consistent with the latest protocol, and then talk about whether we want to look at some additional sources. And then our step 3 is we would start to propose some mitigation strategies. And in doing so, how we could track those mitigation strategies. The inventory, we really want to make it a tool for the town to be able to use. You guys have, as I've said, you have a good baseline report now. We can update it to a more recent year and look at trends, looking at those same sources, maybe adding a few more in. And then so you can really look at how over time some of your mitigation strategies are reducing gases. Obviously all the gas inventory, but some of your bigger ones, it's probably a good thing to start looking at the way the data is collected, so that in the future, the data, it can be updated pretty quickly. And again, you can look at trends and see how you're tracking. May I have the next slide, please? So just a quick, I'm sure you all know this, but just a really quick, almost a reminder, the current greenhouse gas inventory, there was a 2014 baseline, the 2016 emissions. The town was about 2,000 metric tons a year, with the community being 400,000 metric tons a year. That's a very common finding, where your town municipal sources, the ones that the town has control over, will be quite small, and the larger town emissions will be much larger. It also accounted for a net reduction in emissions from solid waste. The vehicles were the largest source of emissions in both inventories, and with electricity and natural gas kind of becoming the electricity and stationary sources being the second major sources, and those are supplied by Rochester Gas and Electric. May I have the next slide, please? So talking about the municipal sources, the vehicles, so there's 3 main sources of emissions. Again, these are municipal sources, and these are the sources that the town has control on. So the vehicles are the largest source, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at the slide wrong. The vehicles, we would suggest updating the fleet inventory. So if that information is readily available. We do want to talk about what year the committee would like us to use, whether it's just really a revamp of that 2016 greenhouse gas inventory and adding some more sources. We feel like because, again, we have a lot of the data in hand, we could easily update that to a more recent year, but we do want to, talk about things like COVID and whether 2020 was a representative year, 2021, again, is it a representative year? But either way, we'd want to look at and to update the fleet inventory to make sure that all of the fleet was incorporated. We would, if we did again update it to a more current year, we would look at to see if there were any new purchases and replacements. And then we'd also want to identify any missing data. So vehicles, the vehicles, the buses and the town, the cars and trucks and maintenance and big maintenance equipment were accounted for, but the inventory did not include things like lawn equipment, and there's some questions on how the employee commute was incorporated. So those are two sources. They would be fairly small. So again, we're looking at just what inventories are always like the first couple of years, you concentrate on your big sources because those are the things that are really driving your emissions. And as you do and more into inventory, you continuously refine those sources. And so, it's totally understandable why things like lawn equipment weren't included. But now as at least some of the smaller pieces of lawn equipment, there are more electric you can get electric pieces of smaller yard equipment, lawn equipment. So it may be something you want to start accounting for so that in the future, if there are opportunities to replace some of those lawn pieces of equipment, that you can start accounting for that in your emissions reductions. And we were also like, and it sounds like with the conversations we had, it might be a little bit harder to track this, but we would suggest maybe even for now to start being able to measure vehicle miles traveled, because that would be a good metric to track in the future, to see how not only are you reducing emissions, but maybe how you're actually reducing usage. Electricity. It sounds like there's a great benchmarking report that the town has done, and we would like to integrate that, and so that we could look at things like footage, make sure we're looking at the metrics of how you reduce emissions per square foot. That's a great way of tracking things over time. Stationary, again, the stationary sources, it was mainly heating sources. Again, the calculations are great. We looked at them. It's whether we would start looking at air conditioning and generators. Again, very small sources, but maybe something to start looking at, especially as you think of moving over, if like geothermal becomes something that's a strategy in the future, we could start looking at these sources. So again, you have that benchmark for the future. Sequestration and reductions, the inventory does a great job of looking at green waste. We would also suggest seeing if we could add the tree inventory. It sounds like the town is starting a tree inventory. And again, set that calculation up. What we're going to do is kind of put this in a database, more of just like a more fancy Excel file, so that we could even just put some calculations in there. So maybe in a year or so, if you have that tree inventory, it's something that could be plugged into the inventory round. So we would suggesting at least setting up that calculation now. So there's a benchmark for that. I don't know if we want to go over questions now. We have a slide that kind of has a lot of these questions, but we can talk if there's any questions about the municipal sources, things like adding some of the equipment, or we can talk about that at the end. Okay, hearing none. Community sources. Community sources, mainly vehicles. Again, we'd want to update based on the newest data and then see if we can identify any missing data. These are going to be more estimations. You are obviously not going to go out and measure how many cars are in it, but we can look at things like census data. We can look at things like community planning. We can look at the county-wide planning and kind of see if there are things to see if we should assume a greater amount of vehicles. Again, thinking about just some of the comments we heard at some of the community meetings. So this will be very small sources, but lawn equipment seems to be something we hear a lot about. So do you want to start measuring that? Again, it would be estimated at this time. We would do something very broad, like look at maybe see if on a GIS we could kind of come up with a number of area of lawns and kind of appropriate something. So again, because there's that estimation, that might also not be something we want to do, because it does seem like the community is very involved in this, and it might be better to get a more accurate number if that's something that's pursued in the future. But we would, some of the other identified some of the missing data, or again, the missing sources, again, you would kind of do in your second iteration of an inventory, are things like, is there a big source of outside employment coming in? So are cars coming in for that? Are there tourist attractions, or do you have like festivals during certain times of the year that bring in a ton of people, like for instance, my hometown in October, get an influx because of pumpkins, so is that, because the full month of activity, that is something to start accounting for. One day event is not, that's noise, but if it's something sustained, we may want to look at that. Again, public transit, we just added that in. I think that, again, because it's a county program and you don't, these are sources you would not have direct control over, but you would kind of look at as more of a scope 3 source. Electricity, I think the methodology is fine. And if, again, we updated it to that a more current year, we would just update it based on the latest emission factor. Again, stationary sources, heating is measured. So could we look at burning is a big source of greenhouse gas emissions. And then we would continue to look at the waste. Next slide, please.
Sorry, could we, so you mentioned New York State has I don't know, standards or something for this. Like, does this cover everything that's covered?
The protocol? Yes, so the protocol looks at, so again, it tries to account for all your sources. So there is kind of a little bit of a dance between accurate, again, the inventory covers the major sources accurately and consistently. So it's those smaller sources that may just result in maybe 10 pounds, 10 metric tons, 20 metric tons, when you're looking at 400,000, that's not, it's kind of noise, but as you do inventories, you usually look, the normal process is kind of, they get better over time, you refine them, you can add them in. But the protocol does ask you to try to account for all sources. So, there's, again, because some of the sources, especially on the community side, are going to be based on estimation, there is some latitude on what you account for and not.
I guess from, I could think of a whole bunch of other potential emission sources that aren't covered by this. They might be small, they might not. I guess there must be work from other towns that would, equivalent towns. I could tell you, like, I don't know. I'm a wastewater engineer. There's a lot of emissions associated with wastewater. The refrigerants are something that, they're really potent greenhouse gases. Organic waste, the amount of food waste going to the landfill. I mean,
so refrigerants are not accounted for, and that is something, again, with the air conditionings, we would like to, we would suggest adding those in. There's green waste. We did not account for food waste right now, and that is something, again, we think we could kind of go over a list of what we see are the additional sources and provide it to you guys, if that's helpful, like a detailed list. I was kind of just hitting kind of the major sources that were not included in the original.
I mean, I wouldn't want to waste time on something that was going to end up being a minor source, but something like food waste, I mean, there are real significant climate impacts from that. So something like that, I think, would need to be. So I'm just wondering if, from other ones you've done, or I don't know, ICLEI or somebody must have, like.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there, especially for the community side, a lot of that is based on, there's different ways to estimate it, depending on your available data. So it's a question of a very, very detailed inventory. It can take a long time to do and be quite costly. quite frankly. So it's kind of ensuring that we get the information that we need to complete this in a year, but also make sure that we are accounting for the major sources. So it will be our suggestion is that we have our climate folks meet with Brendan, and we go through all the data, we go through all the sources, and we see what's readily available data-wise, and we identify what we think is missing, and then we then see how much effort it would take to get the additional information. And then we could kind of give the town an estimate of that to make sure that that effort is sort of worth it. Does that sound like
Yeah, I mean, based off of, I don't know, looking at other equivalent towns in this area or other ones that have been done or other BNL experience, like you think there'd be, okay, you know, food waste tends to be 10% or something of a town's emissions. That would seem worth including, but refrigerants is, I don't know, it's probably 1% something. So maybe you skip that. But I'm just saying that I agree
Food
with you that you can't, I'm agreeing with you can't include everything. So using peer communities or, you know, typical US data, whatever it is, things like that would help you narrow down and make sure that you're covering all the things you need to cover.
Sure. Most of these community inventories do not get as detailed as food waste, to be quite honest. There are, so we, or it's within the larger waste. It's not separated out necessarily as a separate waste stream. We look at the general waste, green waste, which incorporates the food waste. So we definitely can, and there are methodologies to do that if that's something, and I think that might be worth it. Again, thinking about what the community also wants to see in terms of the approaches to reduce greenhouse gas might also be something to look at. Because it's going to be a big source, but it's going to be a very small source in comparison to these three major sources. So there are, the protocol accounts for all sources, and it just becomes what we have readily available. But if there is, you know, if we have data on food waste and the specific within waste stream, we can definitely do an estimate on the emissions for that.
Well, I thought that, this is Bill Baer, but I thought the food waste accounted for like 10 to 15% of greenhouse gases. And if it does, then we could target, that would justify targeting composting as a something to reduce greenhouse gases or something like that. But I don't know.
Yeah, Bill, I agree with you. I think those are good points to make, you know, particularly if people are interested in the lawn equipment and stuff. And even though maybe it's a small amount, but it could be something important to call out. If we're going to now, you know, update this anyways, this might be an interest, maybe pick a few of these things that would be important initiatives to look into.
Mm-hmm. And they're also, you know, I mean, what we've talked about too is that they have multiple goals to them. They're not just emission reductions, they're noise reductions. So you're hearing that from the community, so you're able to respond to them. So I guess maybe a question to the town: do you have a good breakdown of the different? I mean, again, there are kind of basic. We can look at like basic estimations of what percentage of waste is what that is available, but do you have town specific? Is that being measured in the town at all right now, or should we just use kind of normal standards or normal breakdown?
Lena, I might want to be in the meeting with Brendan when you meet, because I was intricately involved in the greenhouse gas inventory originally, and we had some really good partners like Waste Management helped give the original estimate of the food waste and
Okay.
or of the regular waste, and they might be willing to give us, you know, a breakdown, because they're the ones,
Okay.
you know, we do have some good community partners out there, as well as Genesee Transportation, GTC, who give us, there's probably more updated estimate on vehicles for the county that, and that's what our vehicles were based on. So we have those contacts.
Okay.
This is Bill Bear again. I'm kind of eating dinner, but I was also wondering,
Food.
since our source of electricity is transferring over from like coal-produced electricity to solar and wind, do we get any reflection of that as to how much greenhouse gas emissions we produce?
Sure. So the way the inventory, and Aaron, please let me know if I'm wrong, but my understanding of what the inventory did is that they looked at the general emission factor of Rochester Gas and Electric. So there's a coefficient that's every region has a coefficient specific to the region, and it looks at the power plants and where the power plant is getting its electricity from. So if there's some power sources or some power plants are dirtier than others, and there was it sounds like there was a concentrated effort to do that because there was questions at the time over the nuclear facility going offline. So they looked at kind of the more conservative emissions to ensure that in case that did, it wasn't going to look like this huge hit, and that all this new electricity was being used because it was really just because the power plant changed. So as the power grid gets greener, that idea is that the coefficient is going to get greener, right? So that's one way. So assuming that the electricity is all coming from there, but as the town has more solar, for instance, like if there's solar panels put on any of the town buildings, we can start looking at that and then reducing the amount of electricity being generated by the power company or through third party. So greenhouse electricity is a scope 2 source, and so we would account for more of the electricity as a scope 1, meaning you have direct control over it with solar, and take the emission reductions from that side. So we need that information as we do the inventory.
But the whole town of Brighton, since we're a CCA, I think we're like 70% solar or something like that now.
Yeah. So
depends on the year that we decide for this update, right, Robin? One was the CCA.
Right. The CCA has been active for over a year. And so we actually did get a breakdown from Joule and Rocktricity of how much how much greenhouse gas emissions we have probably saved in the time period since the CCA has been implemented, given our enrollment numbers. So, we can have Joule and Rocktricity consult with you on that.
Okay, perfect. Maybe Jamie, if we could advance to the next slide. Okay, so here's what we would suggest. So just kind of basically with the greenhouse gas inventory is just kind of reorganize the inventory on the organization and presentation, and bringing it again. The information is great, and inventory, this is how they're normally done. It's you start with the big sources, you start with kind of amassing your data. Like the fact that there's little notes on the bottom of the table is great, because you know where the data came from. So you start with the big sources, you get it, and then you continuously refine it. So what we would want to do is look at the organization of the greenhouse gas report, as well as to how it relates to the cap. So there's a clear integration of both the emissions and the reductions. And it's not going to be for everything. There's tons of things you can do that aren't necessarily always tied to greenhouse gas reductions, meaning like there are lots of programs that you might do not because it's going to have this huge hit on greenhouse gas reductions, but because it's a community education program or it's an equity program, and those are all great. But things that we can do and we can really see a greenhouse gas reduction from, we really want to make sure that the inventory is set up to be able to track those. So then on the emissions inventory itself, again, we'd want to if that's something the town wants to do, there's kind of two things we can do. We could just take the 2016 data and make it, add in a lot of more sources, make it a more robust emissions inventory. I don't think at this point, looking at the data you have and look at the availability, that and also whatever we want to do, even if we want to just do the 2016, we'd want to update it to the new York State protocol. There's just a small differences, but it's worth it to do. Or we can also update the year, and it's not that much more of an effort. It's what we assumed in our scope. We assumed that we were updating the emissions inventory too, because if we're going to redo the calculations, we can just redo them for the latest emission factors. They're coming from standard, like for instance, the vehicles are all coming from EPA moves model. We have those emission factors for the years. So I can either, if I'm going to update those, I'm either going to update them in 2016 or update them in 2020. It's the same effort. So, so as we look at the data and, what the town feels comfortable with, it might be worth looking at updating the inventory. Two things though in that is that it sounds like, based on our conversation with Everett and the town group, that maybe there wasn't a huge difference with COVID, and I think that we're finding that more and more with inventories and everywhere, that there was this assumption that everything shut down and there was just no emissions for like half of 2020. And yeah, things rebounded. But the truth is that there was still a lot of activity even in that spring of 2020. So I just did an inventory for the Port of Baltimore, and we actually saw an increase in greenhouse gas emissions, which is interesting. But I mean, there is a COVID effect, so we do want to be careful of that and make sure that as we look at metrics, it's tied to usage, and if there's a dip, it's because of that as we go along. So again, 2020 or 2021 might be something to consider looking at too, and then adding sources, any of the sources that the town wants to track. We want to, again, I think as your inventory gets better and better, there's ways to add sources without making your emissions look like they're growing. You want to be able to also add the source to your 2014 emissions, like make an estimate of that, so that then your 2014 gets revised too, which is also a standard protocol, so that as you're adding sources, it's not like you're increasing emissions through emissions, it's because you're accounting for the source that you didn't account for, if that makes sense. Again, these are going to be smaller sources, so they won't change the overall emissions greatly, even if we add them, I don't feel like. So it will just be how much information can we get on some of these other sources in the time frame we have to make sure that the inventory is useful for the cap. So we'll want to start that as quickly as possible. Then again, we'll want to update the emissions inventory to add the clear ties to the cap and the certification actions, and then also identify cost effectiveness. Some sources are going to have cost savings that you can clearly say. I mean, that's the goal of this all, right? And if it was just this easy, if we could say every measure, yes, it's an investment, but there's this huge cost savings. So look, but unfortunately, some of those cost savings are over a longer time, and amortizing that cost can be hard for municipalities. But what we want to do is kind of identify which ones that could come up with direct cost savings, and then where you have targets for grants, because all the grant applications are going to need those emissions. They ask for emissions these days. They want to see the emission savings directly as part of your grant application, so we can make sure that that's something that's useful for you in the future. So again, I think we'd love to have a focused meeting with a couple. I was actually thinking, unfortunately she couldn't attend today, but having Brooke, who's really our data person, and she knows all the data, she knows all the emission factors and knows all the equations, really just sit down with Brendan for a couple of hours maybe and just go through the Excel files, make sure she understands everything, make sure she knows what sources are available. But with the feedback we're looking from you guys today, and I'm sure it's not gonna, whether it's today or within the next week or so, is it worth updating to a to 2020 or 2021 year? And are there sources specifically, now that you've had a couple meetings with the community, that you'd like us to add and include? And food sources, food waste is definitely one we thought of. Lawn waste is, or lawn equipment is another one that we can start having at least some, even if it's a estimation of emissions, just to get some sort of information around so people can have some. Oops, I'm sorry. I need to plug in my computer. Excuse me 1 second. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The irony of it is I'm actually at an offshore wind conference, and I've been talking today about like electricity and renewable, and I can't even get my light. The outlet, one outlet works. If I plugged in my computer, the light goes out in this hotel room I'm in. So I'm sorry, I'm sitting here in the dark. So, and then again, we can start to identify some mitigation strategies. We know what the big sources are, and we know what the big solutions are. It'll take, a lot of them just take money. Just that thing called money. But, electrification, encouraging, you guys are already doing a lot of like VMT reduction. I mean, that's something that's already in the works, in the plans. Looking at more and more opportunities for renewable solar. And I really do think accounting for all of the tree programs is really, would be important as well.
Great, thank you, Lena. Does anyone have any further questions for Lena about the greenhouse gas inventory?
Yeah, Jamie, I'll add a couple things here. This is Everett with the town. A couple things you mentioned, Lena. That is true. So for benchmarking in terms of COVID, we have not seen a reduction, at least a measurable reduction that would seem to indicate, changing activities during the COVID years, at least with our benchmarking report. So something to consider. As far as additional data points or even establishing a different baseline year, as I've expressed before, my concern is having a scope creep and spinning our wheels and spending a lot of time looking for additional data points and data sources that might not be easily available. I think, we want to try to establish the GHG as a tool to substantiate the climate action plan. And so, I would hate to spend a lot of time on something that might not produce much additional information. So just something to keep in mind and be sensible about as we start diving into the data and updating the inventory. And as far as reviewing data sets, I think, as Aaron indicated, it would be beneficial to have some of the folks there that were involved with the inventory in reviewing that data. So, Aaron, myself, Brendan would certainly participate with Brooke.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what I have here.
Just have one question. If the baseline 2016 data remains as is for the major sources, any of the minor sources like lawn equipment and waste, would that be kind of an apples to apples, or apples to oranges rather, if you're looking at 2021 levels of the minor stuff, adding that to the 2014, 2016 data?
So yeah, so what you would do is you would have kind of an estimation of your 2014 data to 2016. So we would not change the baseline. You want to keep your baseline the same because you want to track it. So as you add in a source, You can do estimations of what that source may have been in 2016. So you would then refine your baseline. So to make sure that there was that apples to apples. That's the best way to do it. There's also a way to do it that if you keep, you only compare your apples to apples, and then you have kind of another table that has your additional emission sources that kind of it's additive. So, and you explain that, that you are, those weren't accounted for in 2014. These are new sources. You make sure that they're not, you don't do the comparison on those. It depends on how readily available the data is. For things like lawn equipment, that's a fairly easy thing to do because you're looking at EPA emission factors, so they're available. So say you're making some estimations, but you would kind of if you knew what your current fleet was so say the town had 10 pieces of those big ride-on mowers, right? We'd look, and they haven't changed. So those 10 pieces are in 2016 you had 10 pieces, and in 2020 you have 10 pieces because they're powered by gas or diesel. They've gotten dirtier over the last few years. So that emission factors, you're actually all you're going to do there is change your emission factor between your 2020. And again, that's an EPA emissions factor. And then you can take the 2016 emission factor and do that. You're just changing that one coefficient in your equation. So you could add it into your 2016 baseline report. I'm talking with my hands and you can't see me, so I really apologize for this. My camera has been normally really bad, but this is really horrible.
Yeah, you're measuring two things, right? You're measuring the government, the town government, and then you're measuring the town, right?
Yeah. So the town sources, the community sources are going to be based on estimations. So, like we're not going to go door to door. I mean, it would be great if we could do that, but that takes too much time, right? And
now
so
the government also uses solar. Its electric supply is also solar and wind power based, I guess, right?
So the town and community electricity from the 2016 greenhouse gas inventory were from the same place. It was assuming, Erin, you're shaking your head, so maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, I was saying it was, I mean, the town gets it through a consortium, but it is through the same grid and also it's a 2014 baseline. The report is 2016. But the baseline year for the inventory was actually 2014, just to clarify, so everyone's on the same page.
So really, we should brag that we're doing much better as far as electricity, right? So we're much better than 2014. That's a plus.
If we move our baseline, if we are able to do that, we would definitely be doing better. Yes, you're correct, Bill, because of the CCA.
Mm-hmm. We should brag about that.
We should absolutely brag about that because we are looking to renew this CCA. So want to emphasize the impact because I don't think we're going to get as favorable pricing as we did, 18 months ago. So,
and something to keep in mind as we're publishing and looking at these data points is the implications and sensitivities that it might have on town staff or town equipment. And as we're publishing this information, what type of implications does now have for town equipment? We do not have the ability to just stop on a dime and update equipment and change equipment. So it's something you need to consider when we start looking at climate action plan goals, reductions, and publishing the GHG.
a good point, Everett, because we have come under some scrutiny for that point in particular. So yeah, we just have to be prepared.
Sorry, are you saying we have to be careful what the recommendations are because some of them won't be easy to implement and the town will come in under pressure if they're not implemented?
Well, again, just that we can't pivot on a dime. And it was, so, and I think the expectation is that this is a huge source. So we need to do something immediately. And it's not as easy as it would seem to just change our entire fleet.
Sure, we could be sensitive in the writing of the climate action plan about that. I think, yeah, I agree.
I think as long as it doesn't affect what the, you look at the emission sources and then you say, well, how do you clean those up? You can talk about how practical they are in the short term and how expensive and all that. But I wouldn't want to leave things out because it would be difficult for the town to do. I think I would just say, well,
Oh, no, we should, yeah.
go to all electric, whatever. It's like, well, that's not going to happen. But I don't know. I feel like it should be.
No.
listed.
I think you talk about mitigation strategies, it should be comprehensive. I'm just saying that it's already, the point has already been made, and we're sensitive to it. It's it's difficult, is all.
It takes funding.
I think when we put together, again, the plan, we can, as a group decide which of these strategies are most actionable or implementable, right? And just be conscious of that.
Yep, that's a good idea, Jamie.
Yeah, sure. Okay, anything else on the emissions inventory?
No, I guess so. Just in those next steps. So would it be possible to get kind of feedback on just updating versus doing a more robust 2016 report within maybe the next week or so? Or is there consensus now?
I'm wondering if maybe I should have a sidebar with Everett about this, because I didn't think we were updating the year, but so maybe, okay. But if we have room in the scope, I don't know. I guess I would have to understand, maybe you have an estimate on hours it would take to do a 2020 update for us. That would be helpful if that's okay. Within your scope, or I guess, or if it's just updating the 2014 baseline to be more robust. Mm-hmm. And maybe we just need to better understand that, what the difference is.
Sure, it's within our scope. What I think would change the scope is how much more refined some of the data sources are getting. So again, within the existing data sources that you have, we could update that to 2020. And so maybe a strategy here too is to update your municipal sources to 2020, just to see where you're at, to incorporate things like if you want to look at your electricity and how that's changed from the 2014 to 2016 and now to 2020, because you have that data at hand, you have the data sources at hand, and we could maybe do some small, like, we could do a smaller 2020 report that looks at those municipal sources. And then for your full inventory, really just kind of update that 2016 report with some additional sources, or update it to, we're going to update it to the New York State protocol. So that might be something, if that's. Once we have it's really just coming up with that equation. It really becomes just a math. And once Brooke can get that equation and put the data in there, it really is just hitting that calculation button at some sources. So again, it really is that data collection point is really going to be what drives the scope more than anything.
I guess just to reiterate what Everett said, we've been instructed to stick to the scope. The town is at, and I think slightly beyond the budget for the plan. So I guess, we'll talk with Anchor as well, but I think
we're not asking for any additional
right.
effort or money. So we're not, yeah.
Right. I think the value comes in building Excel tables through this meeting with Brendan, and representatives of the SOC to give you a tool that you can then use going forward to populate as you see fit and as more data becomes available.
So that is the idea, that at the end of this, the town will have kind of standard forms that you can just, new file, new year, new data sources, put it in, and it'll, away you go.
Mhm.
So maybe Lena, Everett, maybe we can discuss this later on and Everett can get back to you on how to move forward with this with
Sure.
Jamie and Lena.
Sure. And then we were hoping to kind of target maybe like next week, if not the next 2 weeks, for a meeting to kind of go through the data to make sure we're getting all of those things. We can start amassing data too, and if we need
Yeah.
to update.
So Aaron, we can get together the next day or so and
Yeah.
then just have a quick chat, and certainly Lena, I'll get back to you, and we can set something up for next week to do that in-depth analysis of the data set and with some more clear direction as to how to proceed.
That'd be perfect. Thank you so much. And yeah, and so we don't, whatever's useful for the town.
Great. Okay, well, good. This has been a good conversation. I think I'm happy that we had this on a number of levels. So we've got a couple of meetings being coordinated, but we'll definitely report back and figure out next steps for the upcoming meeting. So with that, let's go ahead and keep moving on in the agenda. I know we're approaching 8 o'clock, so I wanted to again now kind of segue into the second public event or in a series, right? There's 6 workshops and events created for this planning process and public engagement strategy. And so we have accomplished the public workshop, and this would be the first public event. And so from my understanding and moving forward, this is where Tom's role is going to again continue moving forward with the Sustainability Oversight Committee and work on the climate action plan update. So with that, Tom, I just kind of threw in one slide to kind of hit some of the bullet points that we discussed very briefly earlier. And I will give you the floor and see maybe we can start having a conversation about getting this into planning efforts.
Sorry, just real quick. I had a school event that night that could someone give like a 1 minute on how the public workshop went? I don't know if you're going to cover that later, but
no, I can hit that real quick. And Bill, it's on the website if you want to see the recorded meeting. So that's available publicly now. But that was April 5th, if I'm remembering. And we'd come to the consensus that first public workshop was best as an online meeting. So we did that as a webinar format. Attendance was good. Interaction and comments were good. We gathered a lot of information. I mean, it was meant to serve as an introduction to meeting attendees, but everybody who was on the meeting was pretty proactive with their comments. So overall, it went really well. I mean, I think it was a really good kickoff session for this project. We definitely absorbed some of the comments and are even, working with how to address those as the report moves forward. So successful meeting. I mean, that's a good point. As Jamie mentioned, we've got the public workshops, 3 of those, which are more structured meetings with agendas, whether they're, online or in person. And then we've got the public events, which are meant more to engage residents in their environment, in parts of the town itself, and have sort of interactive, site-oriented types of events.
What's the website? What's
The
the
web-
website? I'm
The
sorry, what's-
website is townofbrighton.org/climate action, I believe. Maybe climate action plan.
If you
Climate
could
action
get that
plan.
into the chat, Grace.
I'll enter it in right
Yeah,
now.
with the dashes. Climate-action-plan.
Yep, it's in the
What is
chat
it?
now.
Chat. I went to the townofbrighton.org and I couldn't find anything about the climate action plan, but maybe I was looking in the wrong place.
We must have a link to the website on the town website, right, Everett? Somewhere?
We might not, so that's something we can certainly work on getting. We did at one point for the event itself, but we might not have a generic link to the climate action plan website. So Brendan and I will work on getting that up if it's not up.
Yeah, we can take care of that. That way everything's all connected.
It'd be nice to have something easily accessible, like really big kind of. It's
Yeah,
a
you
big thing, I
might,
think.
you might be able to get it on the town landing page, just so people don't have to dig very deep.
Yeah, that'd be
That
great.
makes it easier. So we are currently starting the planning for the first public event, which, we have one for the spring, one for the summer, and one program for the fall. One of the things that came up as Grace was drafting the public engagement plan was we know we wanted to do a youth focus group as one of the public events. We originally had that program for the fall, and then the comment came back through the SOC that would probably make more sense to do in the springtime as you come to the end of the academic year, and any work that any of the classes or students have been doing relative to climate action could become actually part of this event. So, Grace and I have made some contacts. We're trying to engage with students, and the idea is to actually, for this spring event, we're going to combine the youth focus with a walkabout. So the thinking is, if we're in the 12 Corners area, we can stage this at the farmer's market, which is on the high school grounds, or possibly over at the middle school. We'll create a staging area. We kick off the session. We divide into small groups that all involve project staff or committee members, and then try to distribute the attending youth amongst those groups. We will map out walking routes from the staging area. And depending on the numbers, we'll be flexible and adaptable for the numbers of people who show up, but we'll go out in small groups with sort of a structured set of questions and observation points. Those can be connected to the 6 climate action focus areas that are on the website. And then basically come back together at the end and do a brainstorming and discussion session. But our idea here is, not us talking to students, but we want to pull out the work that they're doing and their concerns as part of this workshop. The reason we really were wanting to do the youth focus group is because obviously, by the nature of the beast, the younger you are, the more your life is going to be impacted by climate change. So very important to engage the youth. We think it's a great idea to do that during this first on-site event. And that's what we're planning towards right now. So we have some loose ideas. We have some good contacts set up. We will put together an outline and just discuss the logistics for the public event and get that back in front of the SOC for their review and comment. As far as timing, and Grace, chime in if I get something wrong here, but I think we had that program for kind of end of May, possibly early June. We certainly want to miss the Memorial Day week or weekend, steer clear of that. So it might end up being around the first week in June. But we don't really want to go any later than that because we still want everybody here before summer vacations start to happen. So we'll start looking closer at the calendar, coordinate with SOC and the town and figure out some good potential dates. And then basically put together a game plan for this event. How does that sound?
Tom, that sounds good. What I would add is we should have contingency plans in place, or at least be flexible enough as the current COVID trend appears to be, on the rise. So just something to keep in mind as we're planning this event.
Yeah, you're right. This one can be held entirely outside, with social distancing and even masking if that's needed. So I hope this would be sort of the last type of event that would fall off. You're right. In the next 6 weeks or so, who knows what's going to happen. So yes, we'll be adaptable.
What if it rains?
Yeah, that's something we're gonna have to think about. We can either do this kind of as a rain or shine basis, or we can program a rain date. If we get just a really, really nasty day, that's just gonna keep everybody away. So probably we're early enough in this process that we can plug in a preferred date and a rain date. I would hope we'd be able to do that.
So this will get coordinated over email or something, because by the time of our next meeting, that's about when you're thinking of having this, so.
Yeah, we will be coordinating through emails to get this stuff in front of you guys as quick as we can.
Because it'd be great to have many members of the SSC being part of this as possible. And I think we actually had a person volunteer on our webinar, our workshop, to also be part of it. I remember, I don't want to state the person's name over this, but I think you all remember someone did volunteer to be part of the spring event. And I thought it went really well. So thank you very much to the Barton and Judas team. I thought the first workshop went great. And I wrote down we had 43 participants, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And we will definitely follow up on people who are volunteering their efforts for the public event.
And we did have several people from the workshop hop over and participate on the idea as well on the website afterwards as well. So it seems like people are staying engaged after the workshop. So just wanted to note that as well.
Grace, that's a good point. For the rest of the committee that weren't able to participate or don't know, as part of the first workshop, the Ideas Walls was launched. And so that is a platform that you guys can use to provide your feedback to. I know, Shivangi, we spoke earlier and you have some thoughts on stormwater and potential ideas there. So I feel like the Idea Wall is a good place to, make sure your voice is heard as part of this plan.
Yeah, I think we've got a good broad set of comments on the Ideas Well already, and we'll certainly track that as we start to put together this first public event and maybe even be able to zero in on some of the concerns we're seeing from the residents.
Tom, not to get into the weeds, but thoughts on the walking tours, types of things you're going to observe or want to hit along the way?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the 12 Corners area is awesome for that. Everything is fairly tight and walkable distances. And, my thinking is there's just, you can look at businesses, you can look at residential streets. You can look at the central school campus as sort of an institutional land use. And you can look at Buckland Creek as a natural resource. So you can, just loose ideas, we can sort of key in on these different environments and have small groups go and observe and comment on climate issues in each of those types of kind of micro environments, all of which are within a 5-minute walk of wherever we stage at 12 Corners. So I think that'll present some really good opportunities to kind of have a catalyst for discussion.
Okay, thanks.
Trying to do it everywhere, but is there going to be, 12 Corners is one particular part of the town. Is there going to be resentment from folks in other parts of the town that it's focusing on 12 Corners again?
Well, we got 3 of these events, and yeah, from day one, there's been an emphasis on spreading out geographically. So I think this first one makes sense, kind of tying the school campus together with a youth focus group. But, you know, we would love for one of the, either the summer or the fall event, they'll be somewhere else. So we'll definitely distribute these around the town as best we can. Grace, you got anything else on the first event? I know we batted around some ideas earlier as we were doing the public engagement plan.
I think one of the other ideas with the public events was to eventually launch the Brighton Climate App at one of them. I think that's something that we should also discuss if we want to do that at the youth focus group, or if that makes more sense later down the line at one of the other upcoming public events.
I think it could work at either the spring or the summer event, but there's certainly value in getting it launched earlier, just to have it open longer and get more data.
Tom and Grace, for those who might not be familiar, can you provide a little bit of insight on the climate app and its intended purpose as part of the climate action plan?
You want to take that one, Grace?
Sure.
Share the
So
website, Grace.
yes, actually, I have a draft of it developed, so I can just share my screen to give you all a visual. Like with the ideas wall, it's still in draft form at this point, so it's closed for comments at the moment, and we can certainly make adjustments as necessary to this based on your feedback. But we wanted to have a couple of different ways to collect feedback from community members through online avenues, one of those being the project website, another one being the ideas wall, which is currently on the website, and another avenue being through this, what we're calling the Brighton Climate App. So it's an interactive mapping platform. And so through this tool, we can have a map of the town of Brighton and then allow users on the app to drop comments where they make sense in the town. So they can select a certain area where they see some sort of climate hazard or an opportunity to implement some climate action programming, and they can place a comment there. And like the ideas wall, it's a platform where users can see each other's comments, they can reply to each other, and they can like or dislike each other's posts on here. So this is still in development, but we did discuss this in the community engagement plan. We're still working on developing it, but we'll definitely plan to roll this out at one of the upcoming public events. And I can send around a link as well once this gets closer to finalization for you all to preview.
It's pretty cool what you guys have done with all this. It's a lot of work. It's pretty impressive.
Thanks, Bill. So Grace, I mean, one thought that comes to my head, and this is an if we could get the Climate app ready for deployment for the spring meeting, we could actually use it on the sidewalks.
Yes.
And I think if we can get good youth attendance, that might make a really interesting event.
Yeah, students might understand something like that better than us old folks, and might get into it better.
All right, you're gonna love this, Bill. This is what you're gonna love this one.
I might get to use it, get to
Yeah,
understand
you
it,
get
but
to use it.
the students would really like it.
With the, excuse me, with the amount of work and initiatives that the town has already completed, could you also show some of those on there, label them as examples for people to go see? And then also, I think with the Bike Walk Buffalo plan that's been developed, you know, certainly you've done active transportation planning. Is there mapping of that could be dropped into there, so you're not, you know, people understand some of these projects may already be in the works?
Yeah, aren't there some like dry cleaner areas that are already kind of suspect or something like that?
Well, I was thinking more like positive things, like the redoing of 12 corners. you know, the green infrastructure that's been done, you know, pointing that out. I think we should use it as an opportunity to point out, you know, new trails. People
Yeah.
will come up with the negative fairly easily on their own, so.
So that's
We got
certainly
both.
something we can do. Just as an example, I did put what are called info markers on public buildings. So if there are specific locations in the town that you would like to call out, like a street renovation, we can drop a pin and provide some information to people who are using the map. So that will be something good to keep in mind as well. We can make this tool not only as a way to collect feedback, but also to serve as an educational tool as well. Let people know what activities are going on around the town that are related to climate action. So
Weren't there some native plants placed along Monroe Avenue or something like that?
There were, most of the plantings for the Monroe Avenue project were native species. So yeah, Grace, we can come up with kind of a short list of projects the town has already implemented. I mean, a lot of those went to their climate smart communities certification. So as long as we don't, you know, we don't get it too confusing, I think those are great markers to have on the map.
yes, keeping it simple is definitely the best route to go with these tools, but having some additional information I can imagine would be useful for your community members.
So they model how you want them to use the app, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, we could categorize some of these actions would be maybe under some of the terminology that is being used with climate action. So for example, mitigation would be kind of looking at activities that are reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And maybe adaptation would be kind of, you know, how are we adapting to what we are seeing in our environment currently with the impacts of climate. So, you know, again, you know, reacting with green infrastructure, with localized flooding and things like that. So maybe that's a way to kind of put these into categories.
Yeah, we can sort through that. We got a really good handle on things the town have done. So yeah, I think we can keep it nice and simple, but add that layer to the climate app would be great.
But not too complicated.
Right.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I mean, too much information on some of these pages can almost be a detriment, but I think we can make that work. I think it's a great idea, and I think it's doable and understandable.
Be a good geo-visual reference overall too, to see where areas of focus are and where there may be some gaps.
Yeah.
The actual town of Brighton, it looks like it was designed by somebody, a gerrymanderer or something. It doesn't make any sense how it was put together, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's some pretty crazy boundaries.
Yeah.
But that really does add kind of a challenge to us with that diversity from, you know, all the way out to West Brighton, and the way it sort of goes all over this part of Monroe County in a way.
Yeah.
Isn't it because the city of Rochester took some of Brighton back?
I don't know.
Like they took the downtown of it, and
Yeah.
that's why there's no downtown in Brighton.
It looks like a bite was taken out of the middle, and that's exactly what
I think it
happened.
was.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we should take it back.
So we'll work on that premise that we're going to try to get this climate app ready to deploy for our spring event. I think that would be a real great Kickstarter for this project, and to have that out and be able to play with it during these site walks would be really fun.
That'd be cool.
Great. I think that's, I think we've got a good plan moving forward. And just to kind of, again, remind everyone of the timeline, I pulled this from the community engagement plan. So we're at meeting number 4. And as you can see, we kind of moved up the discussion on the inventory. And then in preparation for the spring public event, I think, you know, we're in a good position. Obviously our meeting number 5 we should really kind of set ourselves up for the planning for the summer public event. So what I'm hearing from the discussion is that, again, this idea of getting the outline and logistics together to kind of look at the end of May, June for the event will all be done through email kind of correspondence so that we can keep on track, and that at meeting number 5, we can kind of start discussing the summer public event and then kind of see where we're at in terms of you know, any inventory updates. And I know Lena can come back to this committee and give a, you know, maybe a report out when appropriate, when after we've had that focused discussion with some of the members of this committee and town staff as well. So that's kind of where I see next steps moving forward in concert with the timeline.
And in terms of the summer public event, has anybody gotten together with Sue Gardner-Smith over the public market to see if maybe that could be coordinated with one of their green weekend events? I don't have the comprehensive calendar for the summer, but there's usually dates that make sense. They've got themes on the weekend, so.
Yeah, Robin, I can reach out to Sue. And, you know, it makes sense, even as we're thinking about this spring one, the back of our mind will be the summer event and how those two will kind of work together. So I'll see what she's got cooking for the market events and what we could tie into.
Great, thank you.
Tom and Robin, just real quick, Sue did reach out a couple of months ago. I think I maybe sent the info out to a couple of the SOC members. Yeah, she put a feeler out there. So I think she was indicating exactly what you said, Robin, is that there's a bunch of events during the summer that could lend itself to one of these public meetings. So certainly we'll continue that communication with Sue, as Tom indicated.
And as all of this is kind of going on with our, you know, kind of working with the focus meeting to discuss some more of the details, the sources and baseline year for the emissions inventory, as we're working internally on the outline and logistics for the spring public event and gearing up for looking at the summer event and having a discussion at the next sustainability oversight committee. The other project team members, you know, what I'm also hearing is just to kind of keep the process moving forward and to just be able to kind of align, make those ties with the emissions inventory, with the climate action plan and certification actions. And again, utilizing the plan that has been created by the town to date. I think what we're just trying to do is make sure that we're organizing the information and just presenting it in a more readily consumable, digestible format, you know, really kind of making it more public and user friendly, ways that we can use infographics when we can. I think those are some of the things that we'll try to bring to making that plan more readily accessible and digestible. And again, making those clear ties to the certification actions. So those are kind of some of the notes that I have, and hopefully I kind of accurately portrayed all of that moving parts to this.
Yeah, I think you got it, Jamie.
Great. Okay.
So are we moving on to the Heat Smart campaign?
Yeah, if you guys are all set, I can certainly move on to the Heat Smart campaign item on the agenda. So a couple meetings ago, we were approached by representatives of the Heat Smart Monroe campaign initiative, and we've presented this matter, I think, to the Public Works at a broad level before. Robin, I don't know if you had a chance to present the draft letter to Community Services Committee for the Heat Smart. But essentially,
we did not. Oh,
okay.
But I do feel like it was on the agenda. This was an item of communication that was received for the town board. So
I don't think we've sent this letter out to the town board yet. So
not.
no, so Brendan and
Okay.
put together a draft, and the SOC had some comments, and we've incorporated those comments. So I think at this point we're likely ready to submit to the town board. Robin, if you feel like that's appropriate.
Yeah,
but,
we can go ahead. Because Community Services met last week, it met on the 20th. So town board is tomorrow night. So, well, yeah. So I don't want to wait a whole month.
Yes, I mean, we'd have to shoot for the next town board meeting, which is 2 weeks.
Right.
Yep, okay. So I don't know if the committee has any questions. I think we felt like we've incorporated the comments that were provided. We will certainly send out the final draft and proceed with submitting it to the town board.
What about the unified solar permit letter?
Yeah, so we presented that matter to the Public Works Committee. And at this time, we're not going to be pursuing it. It doesn't seem like it makes sense. It doesn't work with the town process. And it's going to introduce a lot of confusion in terms of having multiple permits and additional work for town staff. So our current process seems to meet the spirit of the Unified Solar Permit criteria. And so I think at this time, the only thing we're going to be moving forward with is the clean heating and cooling campaign letter of support. That's all I have.
Have you heard anything about the Pollinator Garden? Or I know you've been probably really busy, but I'm just curious.
I did reach out to Tom Snyder, and he's still very much on board. So I think it's just a matter of getting together with him, and I guess maybe Aaron or another representative of the SOC to come up with a game plan on how we're going to implement the installation of the pollinator gardens. And Mike, feel free to jump in here. I'm not sure where we stand at this point with trying to reach out to some of the the businesses there, because there's not many residences, but certainly there are some behind there. So we might want to do a little bit of outreach there.
Yeah, we haven't done any outreach until I knew exactly what we were going to do, Everett. So
yep,
as soon as we know, then I think we can make some outreach and at least maybe even have some sketches to show folks so they understand the expectations.
Hasn't this pollinator garden thing been going on for a year or two?
Yeah, I'm not sure, Bill. I mean, it's certainly been brought up on multiple meetings.
Can we maybe take another angle, like just buy a bunch of pollinator plants and give them away, and we get a lot of pollinator plants out there in just everybody's gardens, and we can do native plants and pollinator plants without having to wait for somebody to take action on the pollinator garden.
Yeah, that's not what was presented to the board at the Public Works Committee. So what was presented as part of the Sustainability Fund, letter and initiative is some type of installation or pilot installation in conjunction with Seneca Park Zoo Conservatory. So that's sort of what we've been pursuing. And Robin, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, we did. First of all, there are groups that are doing that. Color Brighton Green already does distribute pollinator plant seeds and seedlings. So that's already happening in the community, but the intent was to actually establish some pollinator habitat on land that the town maintains. And we did talk about this a little bit in Community Services Committee, just, you know, the fact that we wanted to check in to see if we have made any inroads into public engagement on this, so that if we don't get it, you know, going in the spring, we're ready for the fall. So public engagement is definitely the priority right now if we're gonna get this done.
So who's gonna take the lead in it? Because it seems to be going on forever.
Well, we had a little something called COVID that interrupted part of this. So I know Shibangi sent me a note that she would be interested in helping with the Pollinator Garden. I don't know if anybody else from the SOC would be willing to work with Shibangi and talking to Tom about maybe Everett next steps. But I think, you know, our town could use a little help, you know, because there's a lot going on. So Everett, does that make sense? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I think, you know, any help that the committee can provide certainly would likely, you know, move things along. So, you know, whether it's Shibangi, Bill, whomever, you know, feel free to
Okay.
participate. And we can
And I
get
just
that
want to
going.
mention Mitch, who's also part of Color Brighton Green. They did give away some pollinator plants. So the Color Brighton Green is doing that. And I'm guessing might do it again, right?
Yeah, we're planning on continuing to give away the pollinator seeds provided by Seneca Park Zoo, and also native plants at every time we're tabling at the farmers market.
Oh, farmers market.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
we provide them. We provide them. You know, we're there. I think once a month, maybe more, but somewhere around there.
Oh, okay. Now, is it a matter of someone contacting the Seneca Park Zoo? Is that it? As far as the Pollinator Garden at Lockdeville?
Yeah, Bill, I think the next step will probably be finalizing what's being proposed and installed. And then, yeah, so, you know, we can contact the zoo, have some participation from the committee, and arrange what efforts are going to go into that public component, whether we're going to be, you know, meet out on site, you know, talk to folks, that type of stuff.
So were you going to do that, Aaron, for a while, or I thought you?
No, that's what I was asking for, because I think I need to focus on CAP. But maybe
Okay.
Shibangi said she would help. I don't know if anybody else is willing to work with
Okay.
Shibangi on this. That would be really helpful.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can work with Shibangi on it, especially in terms of meeting with the neighborhood association. You know, just finding out their schedule and getting on the calendar. I can help with that.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay, maybe next meeting we can have some, you know, I'm doing quite a few things myself, but, and then I couldn't find my mute button on the solar, what was it? The solar,
Unified solar permitting?
unified solar permitting. Wasn't that one of the things in the CEC, the unified solar permit, that you get credits for if you pass this unified solar permit?
Correct.
So this is something that we're not going to do?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And we're not going to do it for what reason?
The requirements of the solar permit do not coincide with the town process. And so we would essentially have to change the unified solar permit to meet the town process. And then that also introduces additional paperwork. It introduces confusion to residents, as they are now having multiple applications to use when they come to the town.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would seem to be counterproductive to the intent of the permit.
Mhm. Now, there are many other towns that have incorporated the unified solar permit, and they seem to have gotten around that, right?
Locally, I don't know of many. The only one I know is Salina.
Okay. So that's, and then there were, I think in the last thing, there was also the stretch energy code, and that was going to be brought up at the, how are we doing with that?
So the stretch code is being evaluated by the climate action plan. So that's going to be one of the things that the climate action plan is going to look into and recommend or not recommend. That's how the Public Works Committee left it.
Now, the climate action plan is an 18-month process.
That was the schedule. Yes.
And by that time, the stretch energy code will already be established in New York State, right?
No, the stretch code is a moving target. So the stretch code always changes based on the current code.
Okay. And then, so we won't get credit for the stretch energy code within the next 18 months though, right?
Not
No.
likely, no.
So as far as our CEC points, where do we stand now?
I
Well, we're
think
working on the community campaign. And that is that the only active one that we've got, the Heat Smart campaign?
yeah, I think that town's at 2,500 points. So the town's at 2,500 points. So as referenced in the letter put together, you know, obtaining that item would make us reach the threshold for points and grants.
Oh, that would get us at where?
3,000.
3,000 points.
Oh, okay. And then we would get a grant of some sort?
Potentially, yeah. We've never reached the threshold, so I'm not sure how it works, but that we become eligible for grants.
Okay. Now would the garden also get us points as well?
I'm not sure because it's, you know, it's an energy, you know, so we'd have to,
Oh, I
I'm
see.
not sure. Maybe,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Hmm.
But there could be other campaigns.
Now, are we ever going to look at the other, I think there's like 15 or so. I know you said we looked at the low hanging fruit, but are we ever going to look at the other programs in the CEC program? I know like Canandaigua has like 6,000 points and other towns have a lot more points than we do. Are we going to look to get those other points, or are we just going to stick with what we're doing now?
I mean, I would hope we would keep moving forward, and I think I'm hopeful that the climate action plan would encourage the town to do some of these activities. So it just takes time. We'll get there, Bill. Don't worry.
Okay, so we're going to wait for the climate action plan, the 18 months, and then reassess the CEC.
Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they'll make some changes during the process, but
Okay. All right. I'm just checking.
okay.
Thank
So
you.
I'm looking at the time. It's 8:38. Is there any other questions?
The only thing I'm going to throw out there is that, you know, the next meeting is scheduled for May 24th. So I guess just keep it in mind, and we'll go from there.
I just had a quick question for Everett while we're on together. Were you going to respond to Matt about the scoping document?
Oh, yeah. So I will. So, but basically, we can't really move forward until we get to, you know, resolution from the town board. So the town board has to approve the town's participation in said campaign. So we have this letter that we're going to, you know, submit to the town board, and subsequent to that, we can move forward with that.
Would you like me to respond to him, or were you going to toss him?
I can respond to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Oh, Mitch, I had a question.
Yeah.
Are your trees available to like not-for-profits in the city that have land, or is it just, are the trees available only for communities in Brighton?
Anybody. We think of trees as global citizens.
Oh, okay, great. All right, thank you a lot. And my church, Edgewood Church, moved from Brighton to Pittsford, but would they be eligible as well?
Yeah,
Same.
yeah, we just have to wait probably till, we just have to see how they respond. We had an attack on our trees by some critter, so we have to see how they respond before we put them out there.
Oh, wow.
Something
Wow.
got it through the fence.
Oh, wow.
But if not late this spring, at least in the fall, we'll have some ready to go.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Anybody who wants them.
Oh, okay, great. That's great. Thank you.
I guess I'd like to thank our consultants for a great meeting tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to second that to the flexibility of Barton and Judas to make this happen. Tom working through Bergman. I'm glad we were able to make this happen. I think it's going to be a great team.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you all for your time and your input. We appreciate it. Looking forward to getting this thing finished.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, how do I do this?